Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support, please subscribe. The bloody history of the Tudors. Periods. A topic that doesn't get a lot of discussion in any era is menstruation. It has happened to women since the beginning of time, and yet it is a taboo subject. Even in the time of the Tudors, periods were rarely spoken about. It has had many names: the monthly curse, bleeding, coming of age, monthly cycle, or the flowering. But what do we actually know about how these monthly sessions were handled? Women in the 1500s were not lucky enough to have the modern sanitary products we take for granted today, or even the luxury of painkillers. So what were the go-to remedies? Please join us as we look into a taboo subject of the 1500s, and to support us, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. An interesting concept that was believed in the 1500s is that periods were thought to be a punishment. All women were believed to be punished by God because of Eve's temptation in the Garden of Eden. In Leviticus in the Bible, it states that a woman who has her menstruation is impure and unclean. So the Church, following on from this belief, banned all women from having any form of painkillers during their menstruation. As a form of punishment, women were to feel all the pain and the cramps that God intended them to. But with that being said, just because a painkiller was banned, women did use different herbs as homely remedies to help relieve their symptoms, and these remedies were often passed from woman to woman by word of mouth. Another interesting fact is that while a woman was on her period, she was also banned from attending Holy Communion. There is a lot of, according to some, quite ridiculous theories around the menstrual blood of a woman. Some individuals went as far as to believe that the blood of this kind was rather dangerous, poisonous in fact, with the ability to do great harm to a man's penis. Another old theory is that if a child is conceived during a woman's period, then that child would be born with red hair and deformities. But these beliefs were more something that the Church told, not something that was widely believed by the general population, for the Church and the people held much different perspectives, and it did not put individuals off from having sexual intercourse. But with these tales of period terror being dictated by the Church, did women actually understand their menstruation? A woman, throughout the majority of time, has been seen as inferior to a man, and their reproductive organs are no different. A woman's reproductive organs were seen as an imperfect version of the male sexual organs, as they are turned inwards, inside of the body. A woman was seen to be cold and wet, whilst a man was hot and dry, resulting in the belief that a woman needed the dry, hot seed of a man to balance her. But sex outside of marriage was strictly forbidden by the Church, so the seed of a man could only come from the husband. Another belief was that the monthly curse, as it was called, was the womb ridding itself of excess blood, and that if this did not happen, then the body would be overrun with blood and could potentially drown the woman. This idea, although seeming ridiculous today, was founded on zero knowledge of any medical research of the role of a woman's body. During the Tudor era, a woman was seen as an imperfect reflection of a man and inferior to them. In the 1500s, along with other centuries, in the not-so-distant past, the age that a woman started menstruation was linked with the age of consent, and that of the transformation of a child into a woman. This, sadly, is around the age of 12 to 14, and those who did not have periods or regular periods were considered to be more like a man, and remedies were used to help them bring about their periods. These remedies were things such as hot baths, herbs placed up inside the vagina, or drinking herbs such as rue, which was believed to bring on a woman's monthly menstruation. Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife, suffered from irregular periods, and this was believed to be due to her excessive fasting and religious dedication, which affected her monthly cycles. But with everything we have already discussed, there is still one question we have yet to ask. How did women of the Tudor era cope with their periods? They did not have the luxury of sanitary towels or tampons, so what did they use? The most common solution? Well, women would bundle up old rags and place them up as high as they could between their legs. This would then hopefully soak up all the blood and stop any unforeseen stains. Another form was the use of cotton or wool instead of rags, but this was all dependent on a person's status, and access to this required materials. But these methods were not sanitary, as often a woman would be required to wash and reuse what she had. Unfortunately, there is little evidence to suggest how these rags were held into place, but one would think that maybe women would wear a girdle or a form of underwear. A sad but true fact is that a woman's role during this time was to do nothing more than birth and raise children. A woman would have been pregnant for most of the year, reducing the time that they needed period care. An example of this is a quote from Thomas Boleyn, father to Queen Anne Boleyn. "When I married, I had only £50 a year to live on for me and my wife as long as my father lived, and yet she brought me a child every year." If a person was pregnant for 9 months out of a year, then they would only experience a few courses annually. Periods have been something of a taboo subject throughout time, even today, but they have always been something of an everyday and common occurrence. All girls would eventually experience their menstruation, and when they did, it was believed that they had come of age and therefore had the capability to conceive. A woman's ability to have children was fundamentally vital to the continuance of a family line, and thus, although not often spoken about, the menstrual cycle was a very important part of Tudor society. But, with all that being said, a lady's period would have more than likely not have had a regular rhythm to it, for they were indeed living in an era which was pre-antibiotics, nourishing food, and workplace health and safety did not exist. So it is possible that many women suffered from vitamin deficiency, diseases or exhaustion, especially those of the lower class. As it still is today, certain stresses could interrupt the body's hormonal balance and either delay or accelerate the arrival of a lady's monthly bleed. It wasn't until 1671 when a midwife called Jane Sharp noted that periods sometimes flow too soon, sometimes too late, they are too many or too few, or are quite stopped that they flow not at all. Sometimes they flow by drops, and again sometimes they overflow. Sometimes they cause pain, sometimes they are of an evil colour and not according to nature. Sometimes they are voided, not by the womb, but some other way, and sometimes strange that they are sent forth from the womb. In this video, we have discussed that women in the 1500s may have used rags or wool to help control their periods, but interestingly, in other cultures and other eras, a more modern option was supposedly used. The ancient Greeks physician Hippocrates of Kos, who is known as the father of medicine, is widely referenced on the internet as mentioning that small wooden sticks wrapped in soft lint might be inserted into a vagina as a primitive tampon. But looking at the evidence to support this, it is more based upon modern superstition and lacks any evidence in its founding. It has also been suggested that Egyptian women used a tampon of papyrus fibres, whilst Roman women perhaps preferred a similar device woven from softer cotton. Although the evidence for such devices is lacking, it brings us back to the absorbent cotton, which was used in the way that modern-day women use a sanitary towel. This was used by Roman women, and much like the Tudors, this was widespread, and there is evidence to support this claim. Such menstruous rags, as they were called in the Bible, and in the 1600s in England they were called clouts, and continued to be in use for over a millennia, despite the fact that most Western women wandered about Nicholas between the medieval era and the early 1800s, with the only exception having been the fashionable ladies of the 16th century in Italy. Now, if a woman really did spend the better part of 1,000 years without any underwear, then it takes me back to my previous point that suggests a woman may have used a girdle to suspend their rags between their legs. We know, for example, that Queen Elizabeth I of England owned 3 black silk girdles to help keep her linen sanitary towels, or envelopes of Holland cloth, held in the right place. It is also believed that Elizabeth would only bath once a month, whether she needed it or not, and I am inclined to think that this possibly coincided with the end of her period. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.